Hello everyone. Okay, I managed to get hold of another Galaxy S4. I've got two of them now. One from the very first batch that was produced, and this one which is slightly later, probably about 3 weeks later in the production run. Now, one of the things that's interesting to note is that a lot of the observations I made a couple of weeks ago have now been found to be pretty much accurate. While some people say that they haven't encountered any problems, a lot of people are having quite a few issues. Now, like I say, this is a later build. It came out with a firmware already preloaded, obviously from Samsung, slightly newer version than the one that came on my week one build, as it were, day one build, although that firmware was still absolute trash. I'm not kidding you. The device was laggy, unresponsive, overheating. It's set one of the worst 3D mark scores I've ever seen on a Galaxy S4. And so I flashed to the latest UK leaked build, known as ME2, I think it is. And lo and behold, quite a lot of the problems disappeared. I'm afraid what Samsung have done is they've released the Galaxy S4 with the firmwares on there which are simply not up to scratch right now, and you do need to update your device when you first get it out of the box, if you want a reasonable experience anyway. Now, one of the things that I was really critical of with Samsung on my day one device was the quality of QA they'd done. One of the issues I had was this band around the outside that effectively is part of, I suppose you could call it the screen housing, but you could see a very distinct moulding issue, as it were, where the button wasn't quite flush. It looked like it had a small raised lip on the edge there. Interestingly, it's not as pronounced on this device, but you can still see this little issue is there. You can still get your fingernail just in under there, but if you further you come down the housing, the more likely you have to slide off the lip. It's very interesting. It certainly appears that when they're actually manufacturing these, this is probably the final point that's actually placed on. So it bands round that side and then it's clipped and some pressure is applied there maybe. But certainly as it stands at the moment, some of these manufacturing issues are still there, and it may be that this is just how this Galaxy S4 model is going to operate, unfortunately. The heat problem I've discussed previously. It does seem to be an issue with the Qualcomm S600 Snapdragon processor, especially if you're running Wi-Fi and you've got the brightness turned full up. Now, on to the issues that Samsung seem to have caused for themselves. If you head over to sammobile.com, you will find a really good write-up all about really the turmoil that occurred within Samsung's chips division when they were trying to get the Galaxy S4 ready for launch. And it would certainly appear that they really didn't know what parts were going into this device right up until just maybe 6 or 7 weeks before launch. That includes the 9505 and the 9500 model. And they were swapping out everything from, the wireless chips to the Wi-Fi to the CPUs, and we can see the evidence of this actually within the source code and the firmwares they've released. There's a lot of junk code in there that doesn't actually relate to any of the parts that they ended up putting in the devices. CPU revisions and so on. And so you kind of wonder, well, have we actually lost quite a lot of our storage space because of Samsung not being able to make up its mind? There's also been some interesting information about why we didn't end up with the octa-core processor. And actually, guys, be very thankful we didn't end up with the octa-core processor, because it now appears that it was crippled. It doesn't actually work correctly with ARM's big little technology, or little big technology, whichever way you want to put it. And one specific area, which is how it's able to govern which CPUs are going to be used, or which cores are going to be used at any one time, is not really working as efficiently as it could be. That explains why our friends using the octa-cores are finding the battery life and other issues related to how long you're able to keep this device running for. In essence, Samsung's chip division were not able to get the octa-core processor running really as successfully as they should have done, and so they switched out and used the Qualcomm instead. What we have here in the Galaxy S4 is a great device, but only just. Because when you look at what's kind of happened to Samsung when they were building the Galaxy S4, it's a miracle this thing even made out of the door, let alone actually works when it arrives with us. So it does explain why we have all of these strange niggly problems. The headphone jack issue, that you would have thought there is no way Samsung would release a smartphone with a headphone jack compatibility problem with a range of headphones out there. That's the kind of thing that would only happen if you were rushed to market, because you weren't spending enough time perfecting the hardware that you'd chosen to put into the Galaxy S4. Guys, Samsung might very well sell 80 million Galaxy S4s if the rumours are believed, but it won't be Samsung's flagship device. It won't be the one they're the most proud of, and I think long term consumers are going to be a bit, my experience of Galaxy S4 wasn't great. Maybe I'll look at a different manufacturer next time. The rush to market, the problems the Galaxy S4 has had during its creation and its manufacture, it just leads me to think that this particular device from Samsung may go down in history as not their crowning achievement. We wait and we look forward to the Galaxy Note 3 now to see if they can perfect either the CPUs they're going for, the overall design and manufacture of the device, or if they can actually get their own silicon up and working efficiently. But as it stands right now, the Galaxy S4 is a great device, but that just falls short of absolute greatness.